Welcome back to the introduction, the meaning of Fathers of Nations. This is still Fathers of Nations, and I'm your host, Abiga Sherlock. We're going to look at what is Paul B. Vitta's, maybe in fact, meaning on Fathers of Nations, both explicit and implicit. This is still Liberty Media rebranded. In case you're coming across this work accidentally, you bumped across it accidentally, or a good friend of yours did refer you to this particular channel, how about a thumbs up, a subscription, and of course a nice sharing with good friends, especially those ones that you know this work will be of value. So without that much further ado, let's dive into it. Fathers of Nations, the meaning. Do we have to take it literally as Fathers of Nations, or there is a connotation to Fathers of Nations? And if there is, what are the linked ideas to the title that Paul B. Vitta gives this particular good work? So brace yourself, buckle up, even as I take you through this particular journey. Therefore, the title Fathers of Nations is relevant and apt for it satirizes the situation in contemporary Africa. In other words, it is satirical. Fathers of Nations is a honorific title given to a person considered the driving force behind the establishment of a country, state, or a nation. Now, these are figures in African context who once helped drive away the colonial regime and helped their countries gain self-rule under their leadership. Therefore, in the contemporary sense, Fathers of Nations are basically the heads of states and governments. And those are presidents. Mahatma Gandhi is considered as a father of nation of India. He is a figure celebrated in numerous nations and by international organizations. A departure from these current title holders. Now, on Joseph Stalin's 70th birthday in 1949, he was bestowed with the title Father of Nations for his establishment of people's democracy, not as it is perceived in Africa. In this case, he was accorded or awarded or titled the Father of Nations for his establishment of people's democracies in countries occupied by the USSR after the World War II. In post-colonial Africa, now, Fathers of Nations, quote unquote right there, was a title used by leaders to refer to their role in the independence movement as a source of legitimacy, and to use paternalist symbolism as a source of continued popularity. The title, therefore, is satirical in the text. 50 Fathers of Nations herein, titled Heads of State, have met at Banjul, Gambia. The agenda of the summit is not clear. This discussion thereafter has neither head nor tail. Two rival groups emerge, each advancing its ideology. There are those for Path Alpha and another group advancing Way Omega. The debate seems directionless. Therefore, what comes to the fore is that the agenda for Africa is set and dictated by the international financial institutions that continue to impoverish the continent. Though fathers, quote unquote, are expected to give direction, provide the agenda, give proper leadership and guidance to their children, who in this context are their respective nations and states, on the contrary, heads of state in Africa seem to be clueless, visionless, and without agenda. And this is what ails Africa. Hence, it can be arguably said that the problems affecting Africa stem from poor leadership that has presumably evolved Africa as a continent. No, at that particular word, they are good students supposed to be engulfed Africa as a continent. And then, needless to say, this poor leadership is not ready to pass over the baton to a vibrant and a visionary leadership. For the longest time ever, after most countries gained self-rule, the continent is still stuck in the realms of poverty, ignorance, illiteracy, and diseases 50 years after independence. That, good learners, marks the end of that particular brief meaning. And of course, father, what comes with the title father is to bring forth. So fathers are supposed to bring forth. They're supposed to be a symbol of leadership, guidance, and giving clear directions to their children, as we had stated earlier. So quickly, let's look at the summary of the Fathers of Nations here. There's a plot summary. So therefore, Fathers of Nations is a spellbinding and a thought-provoking satirical novel tackling contemporary issues set in contemporary Africa. Paul B. Vitta uses sarcasm through humor to enlighten the reader on the social, economic, and political wrongs in African states. The continent is still struggling with the post-independence problems, namely poverty, ignorance, and disease. Instead of solving the same problems, the states have new entrants which are equally retrogressive to the inhabitants of the African nations, and that is corruption and impunity. The continent is hence depicted as having lost sense of direction and moral correctness. Therefore, the plot revolves around the lives of 4 men from different parts of Africa. These men are Professor Kimani, Comrade Belusi, Engineer Tahir, Pastor Chamaka. They want the African heads of state in a summit to ratify and adopt the document that could transform the continent's economic structures. So the above stated 4 men have initially served in different ways under the current political systems in their respective countries. This makes each and every one of them to hold a grudge against the same systems that affected them, and hence start to press for a possible change. Dr. Abiola Afolabi is abandoned by his American wife, Pamela. Professor Kimani from Kenya has lost his wife, Asio Omondi, to a former university colleague, now a politician by the name Newborn Walomo. His daughter, Tuni, dies in a fatal accident. Pastor Chamaka is a fierce man who is jailed irregularly, also deterred from preaching. Finally, Ngobile Melusi, a big-time politician, suffers in the hands of the new head of state, loses his wife, Ziliza, in a massacre. His Ndebele people are ruthlessly suppressed and murdered by the head of state's direct order. In addition to the 4 men, Engineer Saif Tahir, who is a nuclear bomb expert, Mr. Thaddeus Longway, are also dissatisfied by the American leadership. They are assisted by the Voice of America, VOA, journalists Fiona Mackenzie and Nicholas Sentinel, who in one accord plan to affront the agenda before the heads summit held in Gambia's capital of Banjul. A summit of the heads of African states is planned to take place in Banjul, the capital of Gambia. 50 heads of states are invited, including the Gambian head of state, who is supposed to be the chair of the summit, but passes it on to another president. The heads of states are assembled and accommodated in the Pinnacle Hotel with their entourage. They look forward to readapt the Way Omega ideology, which advocates for a common growth strategy of the citizens, which will enable the donors to continue supporting the African nations through aids and grants. The ideology is fronted by Minister Zinto, who claims that the strategy was well thought out by experts. The majority of the African head of state seems to be aged and have overstayed in power. A good example is President Didier Bangura, who is depicted as senile. Bibo Dibonzo, who had ruled for 40 years, that is found on page 157. We have King Jemba IV, who was a king for life, President Wasi, who had committed all sorts of atrocities, including authoring many coups and so many others. The Path Alpha, a counter-ideology emanating from AGDA, Agency for Governance and Development in Africa, which is championed by Mr. Thaddeus Longway, finds its way to the Heads of State Summit. Mr. Longway mobilizes the likes of Professor Kimani, Comrade Melusi, Pastor Chamaka, Dr. Afolabi, and Engineer Tahir to use the trick, quote-unquote, to table the ideology before the summit to counter the way Omega. Path Alpha is a strategy that advocates for mobilizing civic or public discounted into will to change. This strategy, therefore, is to solve the problems some present heads of state find it difficult to solve. The advocates of Path Alpha champion the strategy because they want to solve the problems and owing to the fact that they have also suffered the ugly state abuse and do not want to suffer anymore. The summit comes to a close in an unprecedented way by the fathers of nations, quote-unquote, right there, students, setting up a committee to bring the matter into a conclusion. The committee set is given the name the Method Committee, which is chaired by President Bangura, who seems to be terribly confused because of senility. He uses two ways to make a decision on which strategy to be ratified. One, the simple matrix by a toss of a coin, and two, choice matrix. Ultimately, either way, the Path Alpha carries the day, meaning the common citizen wins. Quickly, good learners, that marks the end of that particular short upload summary over the same. So let's quickly look at chapter 1. Now, this one I'm working on the premise that you've read the text. It will only make sense after you read the text. So chapter 1 found between pages 1 and 15, Fathers of Nations. We have the 4 strangers with the same mission into this hotel. That is the Seamount Hotel. So it is in the evening. That is how we are fronted by the text. 4 strangers check in at the Seamount Hotel in Gambia's capital, Banjul. None of them knows the other 3. The first one to clock in was 69 years old, Karanja Kimani, a professor in the Institute of Development at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. He is assigned a room on the 4th floor, East Wing. Now, good learners, mark the directions to which they are assigned each room. Now, Professor Kimani is assigned 4th floor and then East Wing. Ngobile Melusi, about 70, a comrade and a citizen of Zimbabwe, is second to check in and is allocated a room on the 5th floor of the South Wing. Third to clock in is about 50, Chineke Chamaka, pastor at the Church Inside Africa, CIA, in Lagos, Nigeria. Chamaka is booked on the 6th floor on the West Wing, Nigeria to the west. Last to report is another stranger, about 40. His name is Saif Tahir, an engineer formerly employed by the Ministry of Defense in Tripoli, Libya. He is assigned a room on the 3rd floor, North Wing. And in less than an hour after the booking, all the 4 strangers, quote-unquote, they receive a call from the same caller who declines to divulge details about himself. He only identifies himself as the guide, and he gives the same set of instructions about opening their briefcases using a similar code, and that goes by 1124. Mark that one, good learners, 1124. The code numbers, we'll be talking about that one later on. Are they significant, or the writer Paul B. Vitta accidentally patches those codes there? So we're going to be talking about in details why the code's 1124. The code numbers fails to open, of course, the briefcases in all the 4 cases. Meanwhile, Dr. Abiola Afolabi, another guest apart from the 4 that we've just mentioned, at the hotel, hears someone call him from behind. From the introduction, Dr. Afolabi meets Fiona Mackenzie, a reporter with Gambian News, a Gambian who was adopted by Ian and Elspeth Mackenzie, Scottish missionaries. She was brought up in Edinburgh, Scotland, and is now back to Banjul. An interview ensues. Dr. Abiola Afolabi is disclosed. He schooled at Harvard University in the US and currently teaches at the University of Ibadan. He is 45 and is an advisor to the heads of state. Africa's heads of state are soon to start a debate at a Pinnacle Hotel, a hotel that is 2 streets from the Seamount Hotel. That is where we see where the 4 strangers were booked. The heads of state are soon to discuss a document titled Way Omega. If adopted, Way Omega is expected to change Africa's politics drastically. There are to be no more military coups, no more rigged elections, no more foul play. Dr. Abiola Afolabi is the author of Failure of States, in which he is so pessimistic about African state of affairs, and yet, in Way Omega, he is very optimistic. A very big irony. He cannot be the author of A Failure of States, and then again, he is very pessimistic about African states of affairs. He was invited by the presidents, those heads of state. The interview ends prematurely. That is the interview between Dr. Abiola Afolabi and Mackenzie, a journalist. Remember, they are in this Seamount Hotel, and then the meeting is supposed to happen at the Pinnacle Hotel. The interview ends, we've already said, prematurely after her boss calls her to the office. That is Mackenzie being summoned by her boss. On the other hand, 49 foreign heads of state are in Banjul for the summit. They still look happy. For Gambians, the presence of so many visiting dignitaries isn't fun here. Before dignitaries come, bulldozers were dispatched at night in slum clearers exercises. Demolished roadside kiosks on which whose families depended upon. Roads got rare layers of tarmac at times of maximum traffic. Checkpoints sprouted everywhere. Water taps dried up because all the water had to go to the new water foundations built to mesmerize the visitors. Catastrophes can happen even at summits. All heads of state are to be put in one hotel, Pinnacle Hotel, so that security is concentrated at the hotel instead of having 50 places to be manned. A few challenges are noticed on how well to take care of the dignitaries in terms of seating arrangements at the summit and the hotel arrangement. Okay, good learners, the few challenges here we'll have to deal with, okay, who takes which position, which head of state sits in which direction, who is going to be the first, the second, the third, like that. Those are the challenges that are facing heads of state. In other words, we have the seating arrangements and so on and so forth in the summit. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is between pages 16 to 20. Now, I'm working on the premise that good learners, you've read this, and that is the only way, or only maybe time that this would make sense. So, at the Seamount Hotel, a mobile phone rings at the Seamount Hotel, West Wing, and Pastor Chineke Chamaka answers it. It is 9 p.m. The caller wants to find out the progress. Pastor Chamaka affirms that everything is fine. The caller inquires whether the briefcase is open and further asks what Pastor Chamaka has seen in the briefcase. Pastor Chamaka confirms that he sees a letter from Agency for Governance and Development in Africa, AGDA, and a copy of a document dubbed Way Omega. He also says that he sees a copy of Path Alpha, the development strategy that AGDA believes is superior to Way Omega and that it hopes to slip in and replace Way Omega. Pastor Chamaka also confirms to have seen leaflets, pamphlets, and brochures from AGDA. He further confirms to have seen the mobile phone that he is using. The caller struck the guide because up to this time, the guide or the caller doesn't want to divulge into the details of himself, doesn't want to disclose who he is. So right now we'll call him the caller or the guide. So therefore the caller or the guide is still reluctant to give his real name. The caller is the only one to initiate the conversation between them. The guide tells Pastor Chamaka that they are on the same mission so he should not worry. The caller further says that he cannot share his name because he feels their mission is still at a very delicate stage. HDA asked Pastor Chamaka to be fully familiar with both documents. Way Omega and Path Alpha, the caller reminds the pastor that he had seen him at the bar at Seamount Hotel taking Pepsi. Meanwhile, another mobile rings at the Seamount Hotel South Wing. Comrade Berusi answers it. Another phone rings in the East Wing. Professor Kimani takes the call. Still another phone rings in the North Wing. Engineer Saif Tahir responds. This time round is about 11 p.m. that again in this particular episode marks the end. Thank you, a very big thank you for watching. My tiny little details there, Tabiga and Sherlock, the narrator of this particular work. You can reach me through that email and also my contact down there for further clarification over the same. Cheers and adios for now.